No one expected the groom to stop walking. Not in a cathedral filled with soft music white roses and people who had waited years to witness this moment. Cameras were already lifting, the officiant was clearing his throat, and then I froze. Because an old woman I hadn't seen in months was standing at the back of the room, leaning on a cane, her eyes locked on mine like she'd been waiting for this exact second. Security moved fast. I didn't. And before anyone could touch her, she raised her hand slightly and said, calm as anything, "Let me speak to him. Just one sentence." I don't know why, but I nodded. She stepped closer, leaned in, and whispered something that made my hands go cold. 6 words. That was all it took for my entire life to tilt sideways. Long before that day, before the tailored suits, the business headlines, the rumors about how I made my money, I was just a guy who liked quiet mornings. I drove myself to work every day, windows down, no driver, no calls. At 7:12 a.m., like clockwork, my car slowed near the old transit hub on Alder Street. That's where I first saw her. Everyone else called her a beggar. I didn't know her name yet, so I just thought of her as the woman who waited. She sat on a low concrete barrier, back slightly curved, a small tray on her lap. A couple of snack bars, some scratch tickets, nothing dramatic. She didn't shout, didn't follow people, didn't make eye contact unless you slowed down. The first day, I noticed her. I didn't stop. The second day, my phone rang and I pulled over for signal. That's when I heard her voice. "Sir, excuse me. Soft, steady, I don't need much, just $10. I laughed under my breath. $10. People usually asked me for thousands. I asked her why that amount. She shrugged. "That's what I need today." Something about the word today stuck with me. I handed her the bill. She didn't gush or thank me like she'd won something. She just said, "I hope life remembers you kindly." Weird thing to say, right? The next morning she was there again. Same spot, same posture, same calm. "Good morning, sir," she said. $10, please." I frowned. "Didn't I give you money yesterday?" She nodded. "You did. Yesterday is over. I should have driven off. Instead, I gave her the money again. By the third day, I didn't even wait for her to ask. I reached for my wallet before she spoke. And that's how it went. Every morning. Rain, heat, traffic, silence. Always 10, never 11, never 9. After a couple of weeks, curiosity got the better of me. I watched from across the street. She didn't spend the money there. She walked slowly to a pharmacy, bought the cheapest medicine. Sometimes bread. Sometimes she paid bus fare and still walked most of the way. Once I followed her from a distance and watched her enter a public hospital, the kind everyone avoids unless they're desperate. I saw her count out the bills carefully at the desk. $10. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories I'd buried came rushing back. My mother raising me alone, working whatever job she could find. The months when money ran out. The day she got sick and still pretended everything was fine. I remembered standing with her near a bus stop, once her asking strangers for help, while I stared at the ground ashamed. I told myself this woman on Alder Street wasn't my problem. The next morning I drove past without stopping. She didn't wave, didn't call out. She just sat there and watched my car disappear. That image followed me all day. By nightfall, guilt sat in my chest like hunger. The next morning I came back earlier. She was already there. "I knew you'd return," she said. I asked how she knew. She smiled. People do when they remember who they used to be. We started talking more. Not deeply, just enough. I asked about her leg. She said it was an old injury. I asked why she always waited there. She said, "Because someone important passes this road." I joked that hundreds of people passed. She shook her head. "Only one matters." I laughed it off, but something about her certainty stayed with me. At home, my fiancé noticed the change. I drove slower. I stopped taking morning calls. When I mentioned the woman, she frowned. "People like that get dependent," she said. "Today, it's $10. Tomorrow, it's your guilt." I defended the woman without realizing how sure I sounded. A few days later, my fiancé insisted on coming with me. She watched closely. When the woman greeted us polite and calm, my fiancé cut in sharp. "Why are you here every day?" The woman looked at her and said, "Because this is where I wait." That was it. No explanation, no apology. After that, things changed. One morning the woman wasn't there. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, nothing. An unease settled in my chest. That night I went through a box of my mother's old papers. At the bottom was a folded note with a name written in shaky ink. It matched the woman's name. That's when the pieces started lining up in ways I didn't like. The wedding day arrived anyway. People smiled. Music played. Everything looked perfect. And then I saw her, standing at the back of the cathedral smaller than I remembered, leaning on her cane. When she whispered those 6 words, it felt like the floor vanished beneath me. "Your mother didn't die." Suddenly, she said. She waited. She pressed something into my hand. An old hospital band. My mother's name. My fiancé grabbed my arm, whispering that this was manipulation, that this wasn't the time. I looked at her then, at the woman who had asked me for $10 every day and never once asked for more. I stepped back from the altar and said quietly but clearly, "I can't do this today." Outside, the noise of the city hit me like a wave. The woman explained everything. How my mother collapsed near the transit hub. How the hospital delayed treatment because she didn't have enough money. How $10 would have changed everything that day. "I didn't tell you sooner," she said, "because you had to choose kindness without knowing why." I walked away from this wedding, from the life everyone thought I should want. In the days that followed, I tore into hospital records, launched investigations, and started a foundation in my mother's name. The woman finally accepted real medical care. "I didn't wait for your money," she told me one evening. "I waited for you to listen." She didn't live long after that. When she passed, quietly people left candles and $10 bills at the old transit hub. I put one in her coffin, $10. Not because it was small, but because it was enough. Life didn't magically get easier after that. Some people called me a hero. Others called me reckless. My engagement was over. My name was everywhere. But systems changed. Policies shifted. People stopped waiting as long as my mother did. I still drive that road some mornings. Sometimes I stop. Sometimes I give someone $10. And every time I remember that the smallest acts done consistently and without applause can dismantle an entire lie. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Was I right to stop everything for one woman and one truth? Or was it selfish to let the past rewrite my future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And if you've ever seen someone waiting quietly while the world rushed past, ask yourself if you'd stop or keep driving.